Well, I'm joined here now by our own political correspondent, Katie Hannon, Jerry Howden, Public Affairs Consultant, Stephen Donnelly, Independent TD, and James McGuill, Solicitor and former President of the Law Society. Katie, if I could turn to you first. There's still an awful lot of questions today, although some further detail on the timeline. But there's a big gap between the first time the Attorney-General was consulted on this by the former Garda Commissioner back in November and the Taoiseach and the Minister for Justice just hearing about this in recent days. Is there a question mark over what the AG knew or what the AG didn't do with that information?
Yeah, there was a great deal of focus on this in the Dáil today. I think we saw in a clip earlier on there Shane Ross suggesting that the AG had been hung out to dry in the Dáil today. What I've been told is that the AG did indeed, was consulted about this last November, but the way it was put to me was that the information she was given was vague and tentative, and that she had no sense at all of the scale of it at that time. Now, separate to that, at that time the Gardaí put together a working group in relation to this. She was not part of that working group. There was some reporting that she wasn't apparently. Now, separate to that, I'm told, the AG puts together a file, a memo for Cabinet 4 times a year called the Sensitive Case File. And this memo alerts the government to any legal risks that are coming down the tracks. And the Ian Bailey case, this case that has emerged in the centre of this controversy, this was one of the cases that she was going to be included in this memo, which was due for government this week. So in the context of preparing this file, she went back and asked, is there more information from that working group in relation to these issues? And this was the moment, we are told, that she first became aware of the scale of this problem, and that this was late last week, and by Sunday she had considered it for a number of days, and on Sunday she passed on that information to the Taoiseach. And I'm told there is no issue on either side of Cabinet with how she has dealt with this issue. Both sides of government are quite happy that she dealt with it in a timely way. So that's where that stands tonight.
And what about the fact that the Minister only heard about this on Monday evening, but officials were meeting? There was a meeting between senior officials and the Commissioner just 2 weeks previously after the receipt of that letter.
Yeah, a great deal of incredulity around the Dáil around this issue, that the Minister could possibly have been kept in the dark to that degree, even though they were meeting about it in his own department. I asked, given that seems to be the facts, that's what the Minister is contending today, is there now an inquiry in the department in relation to how this information was kept from him? I'm told that it's not a formal inquiry, questions have been asked, processes are now being looked at. The only thing I could ascertain for sure this evening was that the Secretary-General of that department, Brian Purcell, did open that letter on the 10th of March, was aware of it, and would have been aware of it, for instance, when he was dispatched to the now former Garda Commissioner on Monday night or on Sunday night to appraise him of the Taoiseach's view of all of this.
And the apology, how was it received?
I spoke to Sergeant Maurice McCabe a little earlier this evening. He says, look, he's not saying going very far, and he's saying, I'm glad that the record of the House has been corrected, and particularly glad that the apology went beyond that and into basically a stepping back from what had been said publicly outside of the Dáil by the Minister. So he's happy with that. What he wouldn't be drawn on really is what he now expects to happen in relation to his access to Pulse, which of course he is still restricted from using.
Thanks, Katie. Stephen Donnelly, you've had the apology. Are you still calling for Minister Shatter to resign?
Yeah, I am regrettably calling on Minister Shatter to resign. I have no political interest in calling on any government minister to resign whatsoever, so it's something I don't do lightly at all. For me, the question is not Minister Shatter's political career. The question is, what is about to happen to An Garda Síochána, and what is about to happen to public trust in the Guards? So what have we found out in the last 24 hours? There is a huge amount of recorded evidence which is being stored, which lawyers are now going to seek on behalf of their clients for cases before the courts and cases where sentencing has already happened, to say, we want to know what was in these calls. Were you taping me talking to my client? What were you as guards saying to each other? What was being said to the journalist? So inevitably, over 30 years of recordings, things are going to start coming out that are not going to reflect well on the Guards. I hope it is a tiny number of cases, but inevitably some things are going to come out. So we are at the beginning of this crisis. This is going to rock public trust in the Guards. And for the Guards to be operationally effective, they must have the trust of the public. So what do we need? We need an exceptional political leader who can step into the breach, who can say to the Guards, I am going to hold you to account for whatever is in these tapes, but at the same time work with you to drive an awful lot of badly needed reform, and who can bring the public online. Now, unfortunately, in my opinion, Minister Shatter does not have the trust or respect of the guards. He does not have the trust or respect to do this of the public. He does not have the trust or respect to do this of the Oireachtas. And therefore, in the interest of the future operational effectiveness of An Garda Síochána, I believe, and I called in the Dáil today for him to step back and for someone else to be put into that role.
James McGill, on those issues about what's going to coming down the tracks here in the courts, we've already seen some evidence today in the Special Criminal Court. Can you give us some assessment of just how extensive you think the implications are going to be of these taped recordings?
Well, I think it's the scale and the institutional nature of it that is most disturbing. Excuse me. I think the first thing we would look at is whether there was impermissible transgression on the secrecy of lawyer-client discussions and whether information obtained from those discussions was improperly used in trials. That's one category. A secondary category is whether or not there were witnesses taped phoning into police stations whose immediate account was not disclosed to the defence, which might have cast doubt on other witnesses or even that same witness at trial, whether there was material withheld even from the investigation team, because it seems to be the pattern that not all Gardaí were privy to the existence of these tapes, and vital evidence that could have, formed the basis of a decision to prosecute or not prosecute was not made available. So I think the urgent thing is to identify all of the citizens who have been affected, identify those citizens still in prison whose convictions may be unsafe, then those who have been convicted and are suffering the consequences of convictions, albeit still at liberty, and then move on down. I mean, there's even the category of people whose good name has been interfered with because journalists, surprise, surprise, were in contact with the Gardaí getting information that should never have been given to them, much of which was inaccurate. So the tape should establish that also.
What about those cases, though, that are currently going through the courts? Are we really looking at all of these cases just being frozen while this Commission of Investigation does its work?
Well, the Commission could work in parallel to the normal trial process. I mean, a court will supervise disclosure, and if there's material where innocence is at stake, it's relevant to the prosecution, that must be made available. The Director's own guidelines to her prosecutors are that that material must be released, and so it must be released in pending prosecution. They shouldn't be delayed at all. I think the delay issue, if you like, or the volume of work is going to be in historical cases that have already been dealt with in the trial process.
If I could turn to Gerard Howlin now. Gerard, the political handling of all of this, do you think that Minister Shatter filled in enough of the unknowns, particularly about those tapes today, or is there still enough uncertainty and enough potential damage from those cases that we've just been hearing about from James McGill to cause him further political problems?
Oh, he has a lot of further political problems. He did enough today to go on tomorrow and for the coming weeks and the foreseeable future until the next bump in the road as Minister. But there will be several big bumps in the road, and his ultimate survival is far from assured. And I think the problem in government is manifold. This wasn't a conspiracy at any level. That's cock and bull and whatever. This was a chaos on a grand scale. This was a highly controlling government, which political power intensely concentrated on 4 ministers in the cabinet, relatively few advisors, running an incredibly tight ship for 3 years, completely losing its composure politically this week for the first time comprehensively.
What about the position of the AG? Is she under any kind of threat, do you think, despite the assurances obviously coming from within government over how she's handled this?
I listened to what Katie had to say very carefully, and I think if that explanation holds true, I think that people will be reassured. For now, she's not under threat, but I think she is under question, and I think it will be important for her to find a way, as Attorney General, to explain herself and the processes within her office very comprehensively for the sake of her reputation and the reputation of her office.
Can they put a cap on this now?
No. This is far from finished. And to take James's point, if it transpires that somebody walks from prison, that a crime that had been convicted for, that a family who felt they had had justice at the end of a process, if that unravels in a case, as it might, unfortunately, that would be politically toxic.
Stephen Donnelly, to you, and briefly if you could, are you satisfied with the apology part of today's proceedings?
I'm glad it happened, but you know, it's I think too little too late. It happened under exceptional political and public and media pressure. The Minister has had numerous opportunities, as had the former Commissioner, to come out and say, you know what, these things were said, they were said in the heat of the moment, they shouldn't have been said. I don't take any solace from it, but for me that's not the issue. The issue is, how do we protect the rank and file guards, the institution of a Garda Síochána, and maintain public trust in the guards? Can Minister Shatter walk that very tight line between holding them to account, helping them transform, and keeping the public trust in the guards? The fact that he apologised today, I think most people will say, look, it was done under duress. You've had weeks to apologise. And unfortunately for me, is yet another part of why he, whilst I think an excellent legislator, a very hard-working guy, an excellent legislator, I don't believe that he is in any position to provide the kind of leadership that's going to be required over the coming weeks, months and years.
James McGill, between what's gone on with the tape recordings and the damage done to the penalty point system, do you think that there has been a lot of damage done to the way justice is administered in this country, and is that being reflected in the courts where you work?
Well, it's beyond argument. I mean, you can see that people are genuinely baffled at how this could come to be. A state of affairs has gone on for decades, which was frankly subverting the Constitution by the persons charged with upholding it. So naturally people are alienated from the system, and it's really important that we maintain a sense of perspective, that the Commission is given time and resources to do the job properly, and that we take account of the fact that when this came to light, when the law officers became aware of the scale of this, it stopped in November. Nobody is defending the practice. It is acknowledged as being a shameful and egregious violation of citizens' rights.
Last word to you, Katie. Where do we go with this story next?
Well, the view tonight is it was never too late to say sorry, and that has done enough to save the situation, to give them a breather right now. But everyone knows that the Cook report is on its way. This is the report into the GSOC bugging controversy. We know that the Sean Guerin report into that dossier that Micheál Martin gave to the Taoiseach a number of weeks ago, that's coming down the tracks. Both of those have the potential to have major difficulties for the Minister in it. So it's a breather for now, and a sense that, OK, we've gotten over this one, but this is a very deeply, deeply damaged Minister, and as Jared said there, bumps in the road could cause him a lot of difficulty down the tracks.
Bumps in the road ahead.